Peace, peace. Hello. Welcome to the second episode of the Shivery Podcast. I'm your host, Lay Gervais, actor, man of many talents, an entity inside this entertainment industry, if you will. Also, co host of the Candid Corner podcast every Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my brother, Coach Fa. Shout out to you, fam. Shout out to Off the Ball Network, Chris LeBron, and all the fellas there. We taking over the new faces of sports, I guess you could say. But here, we're talking about all things paranormal, primarily ghosts and paranormal investigations. If you remember from the first episode, I am one of those who leans more toward scientific evidence, though I am open to hearing many stories because I know oftentimes honest people do have stories that are unexplained that they want to talk about without judgment and without assumption that they're lying. Um, I like to consider my BS meter fairly balanced, so I usually can get a good idea if somebody's lying to me or not. Plus, being an actor, I'm like basically I lie for a living, so I guess I'm a pretty decent lie detector as well. With that said, those who really started off this whole history, well, let me backtrack. We're going to go about the history of paranormal investigation, and what really sparked the popularity of it is Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were themselves just regular everyday people that, you know, felt they had a calling. Lorraine Warren herself talks about having gifts ever since she was a child. And long story short, her and her husband had a whole lifetime of paranormal investigating as well as being tormented by entities themselves. The whole Conjuring movie series is roughly based on their investigations and their career. Without further ado, if the technical issues have been ironed out and I can play this without interruption for y'all, I will give you an interview of theirs from a few decades ago. They've both since passed on. They now really know the truth of what happens, I guess you could say, after we leave this plane of existence, at least. Um, Here we go. Now we're going to take a little break right there. Just a couple things real quick. When they mentioned magic whispering, modern day terms would call that disembodied voices. That's when, of course, it's self-explanatory. You hear a voice, but no one is there, but you can clearly hear someone trying to say something to you. Sometimes folks say they hear it very clearly. Most times you just hear like a mumbling, like somebody is having a faraway conversation or even a whisper conversation that you can't quite pick up what they're saying, but you know that someone is speaking. Um, and also, being that they were a really religious couple, I know those of us who aren't Christians might find some of their methods and some of their assumptions debatable. Um, a lot of folks still argue whether or not the whole demon thing is actual demons or it's actual just bad people imitating certain things. Used to be a show I watched on television. Forgive me, the name escapes me right now. Um, but basically, it was a New York detective and a psychic, and they would investigate homes. And separately, the detective would use his police methods and speak with the guests of the, I guess, whatever episode it would be, and find out what's happening there and come to his conclusions based on his investigations. And the psychic would come through and talk about things that she was seeing and feeling and hearing through her gifts. And in the end, an artist would draw a sketch of who she saw or what she saw. And I bring that up because oftentimes she would mention the fact that, yes, these entities we think are otherworldly beings are just humans who have, I guess, mastered the spirit world and are able to manifest pretty much in any way that they want to. Um, but that's way deep stuff, you know. Yeah, but that was just, a brief explanation of differences and certain terms and what they mean and stand for. Um, get back to the conclusion of this haunting phenomena episode with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and then I will discuss an experience I had with my family when I went to Gettysburg. And that was excuse me, a segment from one of their shows they would have running, talking about their paranormal experiences. Sorry, it went a little long, but they did have a lot to talk about. I cut it off, what I mean, because I mean, I know the man, sure, I'm sure he had an interesting story to tell, but the platform is mainly for talking about Ed and Lorraine. And if you haven't seen already, go check out the newest Conjuring trailer. And let me mention too, the show I mentioned earlier is called The Dead Files. It's hosted by Amy Allen and Steve DeShavi. My apologies, I should have remembered that off the bat. As many times, as many years as I've watched that show, yeah, I should have remembered that. Also, shout out if y'all, if you like this podcast and you want to check out more paranormal podcasts, I would say to check out the Real Ghost Stories Online and the Campfire Podcast and the Paranormal Geek Podcast. Those three I tune into personally, and they're some of the best ones out there. There are a lot of them out there, but a lot of them, they seem to be caught in the trap of just, I guess it becomes humdrum with the same old stories. And yeah, it's subjective. I don't want to put anyone else down. So I might be boring somebody myself right now. But as I was saying, my very first ghost hunt, as an amateur, was taking my family, my wife, my son, and a few of his friends on a trip to Gettysburg. It was close to about 10 years ago now. And we went to the Farnsworth house for the ghost hunt there. Very nice place. If you're ever in the PA area, go to Gettysburg if you're not afraid, if that's what you're into. And even if you're a skeptic and you want to be have your mind changed, I guess you could say, go to Gettysburg. Trust me. Hell, even the drive there, every time I've driven to Gettysburg, the drive there itself is spooky in itself. It's weird. So you can hear the Scooby-Doo music and everything. But anyway, we went to the Gettysburg ghost hunt at the Farnsworth house. It was fun. It was a little short event. They were running kind of late on time and it was really crowded, so they had to kind of rush us along, but no biggie. I wanted to get to the ghost hunts anyway. While he was giving us a brief history in the basement of the house, though, we did hear a few bumps and knocks and saw the mirror like move a little bit, but we didn't see any apparitions manifest or anything. We went out on the ghost tour. We had amateur equipment. They all issued us like our standard voice recorders to collect EVPs. EVPs means electronic voice phenomena. It means like, prime example, you would hold, if you've seen ghost hunting shows, you know what they do. They would hold up the voice recorder and ask questions and then hold it in the air. And later on, listen to the playback to see if there was any voices that they picked up. And so we're out there with that. And for the most part, it was hard to try to hear anything in front of you because, like I said, there was so many people out there, even though it was like 9:30 at night and it just like finished thunderstorming like crazy. It was still wild crowded out there. And went out there and we still got some pretty decent EVPs. And we had the dowsing rods as well, if people know what those are. And we were picking up, actually communicating with some spirits with that pretty effectively. But for the most part, that was it. That's all we got out of it. But it was still really interesting because, like I said, that's the first time actually getting evidence on my own and seeing that maybe those paranormal shows weren't full of crap, because I always have a healthy dose of skepticism with anything, So once I was able to prove it on my own, I became more of a believer, so to speak. And my son and his friends and my wife, that we all had a good time, and they wanted to do it again. But that was just the beginning. After that, we went on a tour of Eastern State Penitentiary, but that's another story. Um, Back to the Farnsworth house. There was a story about a little boy named Jeremy. If I'm not mistaken, he was an orphan, and he unfortunately got ran over by a horse and buggy in front of the Farnsworth house, and his spirit was known to wander between many houses, actually. And after the ghost hunt and before we left, I decided to swing by the souvenir shop, of course, to buy souvenirs for the family. And I bought myself a t-shirt with Jeremy on it, and thought it was pretty cool. I even have a couple other shirts from places we've been like that. Um, I wore this shirt. This is back when I was going to college and pursuing my bachelor's, and I wore it to school one day. And from that morning, it's like my mind was in like this foggy haze. And I proceeded to have one of like the worst case of the Mondays, to put it lightly, that I've ever had. So much so that I was determined to never wear that shirt again, because I was positive that the shirt had something to do with it. It was just, I don't believe in coincidences, and it was just too much going on. And what's crazy is I can't remember exactly what happened to me, even though I feel the frustration and the I won't say fear, but the anxiety from realizing that maybe it's the shirt. I took it off and it sat in the back of my closet for years, and then one day I gave it away to charity with a bunch of other clothes, and it didn't even dawn on me till later on. I was like, oh, I just want to apologize to whoever has that shirt if they've come across any misfortune. And that concludes today's episode. This is your man, Lay Gervais. Like I said, this is the Shivery Podcast. If you have a story you want played on the air or read, send me a voicemail or an email to shiverypod@gmail.com. To all my sports fans, I'll see you Wednesday evening. To all my paranormal blurs like myself, see you next Monday, same time. Stay spooky, y'all.